When we think of North America, one giant nation usually soaks up all the attention. But right next door, you've got two other continental powerhouses, Canada and Mexico. They're vast, they're complex, and they are absolutely packed with history. These are North America's other giants. So let me ask you, how much do we really know about them? I mean, beyond the usual stereotypes and news headlines. Today, we're going to dive deep into their origins, how they're run, and the incredible landscapes they're built on.
Okay, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the ancient roots of these places, then jump into their modern structures of power. After that, we'll explore their totally different landscapes, and we'll wrap up by looking at how they're connected by a continent.
To really get a handle on Canada and Mexico today, we have to rewind the clock and see who was there first, because really, their pre-colonial histories set them on two completely different paths. This right here shows a huge difference in how power worked. Down in what would become Mexico, the Aztecs had this massive top-down empire, all run by one super powerful emperor. But up north, in the lands that would be Canada, you had First Nations tribes working on a totally different model. It was all about community, discussion, and consensus between chiefs and elders. Two completely different ways of thinking about leadership, right from the very beginning. And since they didn't have a formal written language, they found other amazing ways to keep their culture alive. History, laws, all their traditions. It was all passed down through incredible oral storytelling and recorded in these beautiful, intricate wampum belts and bark drawings. Meanwhile, way down south, the Aztecs were leaving a different kind of mark. Their capital city, Tenochtitlan, wasn't just big, it was an absolute engineering marvel. I mean, they built it in the middle of a lake. That alone tells you everything you need to know about how advanced their architecture and city planning was. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. Their journeys to becoming the countries we know today were also really different. Mexico set up its first federal government way back in 1824, but its modern identity was really forged in the fire of revolution, that big fight against a dictator in 1910 that gave them their current constitution. Canada's path, on the other hand, was a bit more gradual. The big step was in 1867, when the Dominion of Canada was formed, giving it self-governance. So that brings us to today. How do these two countries actually work? Well, their governments really reflect those unique histories we just talked about. And here's the biggest difference right off the bat. Canada is a constitutional monarchy, so technically their head of state is the British monarch, who is represented by a governor-general. Mexico, however, is a federal republic. They elect a president who serves as their head of state. This chart breaks it all down perfectly. See how in Mexico the president wears two hats? They're both the head of state and the head of government. But in Canada, those jobs are split between the monarch and the prime minister. But check out the similarities. Both have a bicameral legislature. That just means two houses, a Senate and a lower house, even if the names are a little different. And that term, bicameral, is really a key feature they share. The whole idea is to have checks and balances. Laws get debated and looked at by two different groups before they can actually be passed. So even though each system has its own unique flavor, they're both built on a solid foundation of democratic principles and a written constitution. That's the legal bedrock for everything that happens within their borders. All right, let's switch gears from politics to the physical land itself, because the sheer size and variety of Canada's and Mexico's geography is just mind-blowing, and it defines them just as much as their history does. Just look at this number for a second. Over 243,000 kilometers. That's Canada's coastline. It is, by a huge margin, the longest of any country on Earth. Having a border that massive, touching 3 different oceans, has completely shaped its identity and its economy. And that coastline wraps around an incredible variety of landscapes. Canada isn't just one big environment. It's like a patchwork quilt of 7 different regions. You've got everything from the ancient, mineral-rich Canadian Shield to the huge farmlands of the interior plains, all the way to the massive mountains of the Western Cordillera and the icy islands of the Arctic. And it's not just land. Canada is basically a water superpower. It has more lakes than the rest of the world put together. That means it holds a gigantic chunk of the planet's fresh water. Think about that. In a world that's only getting thirstier, that is an unbelievably valuable asset. So, you add all that up and what do you get? An incredible amount of natural resource wealth. And the variety is the key.
You've got minerals, huge forests covering almost half the country, all that fresh water for hydropower, and of course, a lot of fossil fuels.
Now, Mexico's resource story is a little different. It's also incredibly rich, don't get me wrong. Think silver, copper, and gold. But for a long time, its economy got really tied to one main thing: oil. And that dependency became a huge problem in the 1980s when global oil prices crashed and sent their economy into a crisis. It was a tough lesson about the dangers of putting all your eggs in one basket. So we've looked at their separate histories, their different landscapes, but here's the thing. No country exists in a bubble. So let's talk about how these two giants are connected by the very continent they share. And this leads us to a really important question. For all their differences, the economic success of both Canada and Mexico is deeply connected to the exact same trade partner. So, who is it? Yep, the United States. It's the simple, powerful answer that really defines the entire North American economy. The U.S. is, by far, the #1 customer for both countries, creating this deeply intertwined economic web across the continent. And that quote really nails it, doesn't it? You've got these two very distinct nations, each with its own identity, but both have to manage this super complex and essential relationship with the superpower that sits right between them. They share a continent, but they're absolutely forging their own unique paths. And that history isn't just something in a textbook. You can see it everywhere. It's right there in the Aztec symbol on the Mexican flag, and you can hear it in the living oral traditions of Canada's First Nations. The past is still a very real part of their present. Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. As North America gets more and more connected through trade, culture, everything, how are Canada and Mexico going to define their own futures? Not just as neighbors in a trade bloc, but as powerful, influential countries on the global stage. Now that is a story that's still being written.